Welcome to Brush Lettering and Watercolor with Jess Park. This week we'll be talking about the basics of brush lettering. So let's start and talk about supplies. The first thing you're going to need are small-sized brush pens. You'll notice on the instructional sheet I have a list of the recommended pens that I like to use. The first are these Tombow Fudenosuke hard tip, which is the blue case, and soft tip, which is the green case. The next on the list is the Tombow Twin Tip. It has a black side and a gray side. Next we have the Pentel Fude Touch Sign Pen. So that looks like this. And this one comes in a variety of different colors. Next on the list is a Sakura Pigma Professional Brush. This comes in 3 different sizes, and for this class I recommend using the fine tip. And the last I have is a Zebra Disposable Brush Pen. This one also comes in a variety of sizes, and I like to use the fine tip, which is this blue case. All of these pens are small sized, which means that the tips are fairly small and come to a fine point. This is perfect for when you're starting out and when you're practicing your lettering. These 2 pens, the Tombow Fudenosuke hard and soft, are both waterproof, so they're nice to use with watercolor if you want to letter first, and then the other ones are not waterproof. So the next thing on your supply list are the guide sheets, which I've included with your instructional sheets. And the last thing that you're going to need for today is the Strathmore tracing paper. I like to use tracing paper when I'm practicing because it's really easy on my brushes. It has a very smooth finish and it's not going to fray my pens. So Strathmore makes great tracing paper, and I'm today using the 100 series tracing pad. Okay, let's talk about how to hold your pen. So when you're holding your pen, you don't want to hold it too upright where you're using the tip of the pen. You kind of want to hold it at an angle like this. And I'm just resting it between my thumb and my, kind of like where that part of your hand right here is where you're going to put your pen. In calligraphy, you'll notice that there are thick lines and there are thin lines. And the way to achieve that is by applying pressure with your downstrokes and releasing pressure with your upstrokes. So let's go ahead and practice that. Take your guide sheet and stick it under a piece of tracing paper. I'm going to tilt my paper to help me achieve these slanted strokes. So starting with the downstroke, when I go down, I'm going to apply full pressure. And again, full pressure. Keep practicing this, and you'll notice I'm going quite slowly. That is a full pressure downstroke, and that achieves those thick lines. To achieve the thin lines, you're going to use very light pressure. So let's go ahead and do an upstroke. And that is how you would achieve the contrast between the thick and the thin strokes. Let's move on to the basic strokes. So these are the most important strokes that you're going to have to learn because they make up almost every letter of the alphabet. Now keep in mind, this is just my style of lettering. And so you may notice if you learn a different type of lettering or a different style that it may have different strokes. So let's go ahead and begin. The very first stroke I have here is called an entrance stroke. This is the stroke that you're going to use when you're starting a word, when you're starting a letter, and sometimes even when you're connecting letters. The next basic stroke I want to talk about is this U shape, or you can also call it an underturn. The next stroke on the list looks just like the underturn, except it has a longer downstroke. And then we have the overturn. The next on the list is this compound curve. It's a combination of the overturn and the underturn. And the next stroke on the list is the ascending stem loop. The next basic stroke looks just like the ascending stem loop, except it's going to be descending. The very last stroke is the oval. This is one of the harder strokes to master. Now let's practice writing each stroke. I'm just sticking my guide sheet under the trace paper. And again, I do this so that I could protect my pens, and then also because then I can use the guide sheets over again and again without having to reprint them. So I'm going to start with this entrance stroke here. And you'll notice my paper is tilted at an angle. If at any point you feel that I'm writing too quickly, go ahead and pause the video and rewind. Moving on to the underturn. Full pressure, release, and back up. With this stroke, you're actually going to be releasing pressure right around here. Just as with the underturn, you're going to release pressure right around here. Now with the overturn, you're adding pressure right around here. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the compound curve. Up, apply pressure, release pressure, and back up. So you're adding pressure around here and releasing around there. Okay, for the ascending stem loop, you're applying pressure around here. You're starting right at that midline right there. Up, full pressure, release, full pressure, release, and the last is the oval. So you'll notice I started right here, and I release pressure somewhere around there. So it's a gradual addition and release of pressure. Alright, so the first letter we're going to start with in group 1 is the letter I. It's basically made up of the underturn with a little dot on top. If I'm going too quickly, feel free to pause the video and rewind. The next letter in group 1 is the letter T. I'm going to start in between the top line and the dotted line with full pressure, then release, and then I'm crossing it a little above the dotted line. So let's do that one more time, or a few more times. The next letter on the list is a J. The J is made up of the entrance stroke, the descending loop, and then just like a little part of the entrance stroke. So it goes up, down, and around, and then back up, and then you add your dot. So you'll notice after each stroke I lift up my pen, and that's really good practice. A lot of people feel like they have to have good handwriting to do brush lettering, but it's just not true. If you can master the basic strokes, then you can go ahead and do brush lettering. Okay, we're going to go ahead and work on A. So A is made up of the oval and the underturn. So you're going to start down here a little below the dotted line. Lift. Now the G, you're going to do an oval and a descending loop. So here's my oval. And then to end, I'm adding part of the entrance stroke, which I guess here would be now called the exit stroke. Okay. Next, let's move on to the letter N. So the N is made up of full pressure stroke down and then the compound curve. So down, up, and around. Oops. It's a little shaky there. Let's try that again. So it's down, up, and around. And the M is quite similar. So it is full pressure down. I've got the overturn. And then a compound curve. So U is made up of the underturn. Well, I guess two underturns, except the second one is not complete. It just kind of ends there. I'll try that again. So again, if you notice, my paper is quite tilted, and I like to do that so that I can get this slant. We're almost done with group 1. We're going to go ahead and do the Y. So the Y is made up of the underturn and then the descending stem loop. Okay, so we're going to move on to group 2, which is made up of L, D, H, and K, and you'll notice that all of those letters have ascending stem loop. So L is made up of an ascending stem loop, and then it moves into an underturn. So you're going to go up, around, and that is an L. Okay, and then the next letter is D. So D is made up of an oval, and then you're basically writing an L next to the oval. Okay, and then moving on to the H. The H is the ascending stem. So up, then you stop, lift up your pen, and then you're going to do a compound curve. And again. Next letter is the K. So I'm going to actually do not the ascending stem loop, but the other part first, so just so I can show you what it looks like. Basically, it's a little loop like this. So you go up and then full pressure down. And then to make the next part, it looks like that, where you have full pressure and then you go back up. So what you're doing is you're ascending that little loop, and then like that. that is your K. So if I were to write it in order, it would be 1, 2, 3, 1, and again I'm lifting after each stroke. So that's the K. All right, we did great with that, and we're going to go ahead and move on to group 3. So group 3, what it has in similar, or what they all have that's similar, is they have this little stroke that looks like this. So I'm going to show you what that stroke looks like without the letter first. Like that. So it's a full pressure and then an up. So it looks almost like a little tail. So if I were to write an O, I'd make the oval. Let me tilt my paper a little more. And then that little tail. Just like that. So around and up. And then we're going to move on to the next letter in group 3, which is V. So V is a compound curve. And at the very end, you add that little tail that we had for the O. And this little stroke is what connects it to the subsequent letters. Up, down, and then up again. So that's V. And then for W, you're doing 2 underturns. So 1, make sure that's off camera. Let's do that again. 2, and then the little tail. 1, 2, and let's move on to the last letter of group 3, which is X. So X looks just like V. Except it's got, oops, move my paper here. An extra little stroke, and that looks like this. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that stroke first by itself so you can see what it looks like. That's what it looks like. And then with the whole letter, looks like that. So this was kind of a bad example because I did it out of order, but this line here and this line here should be more parallel. So again, that's and I hope you can see the difference here versus here. So let's move on to group 4, and it's made up of letters that don't necessarily have all the basic strokes in them. So we're going to go ahead and start with the letter C. The C is almost like the oval, except it's just not complete. Let me actually switch colors here. Okay, so another way it's different from the oval is that instead of making it so this bottom line and this top line would meet, I'm going to bring it out, and that helps me connect it to the next letter. So again, like this. Okay, so now let's move on to B. B is made up of the ascending stem loop, which you know, and then it's got this stroke that looks, I'm going to show you that a few more times. Okay, we've got that. And then it's up, down, and around. Okay, so that's B. We're going to go on to E. E is almost like a tiny ascending stem loop and mixed with a C. So again, you want to kind of draw this last stroke out towards the right so that you could connect it to the next letter. And then we're going to move on to P. It's a full pressure downstroke. And then it has that stroke that we saw earlier in the B, so it's pretty much that exact same. Okay, so let's move on to Q. Q is made up of an oval. And then it has almost like a backwards descending stem loop. Ideally, you do want all your ovals to be the same. That's a Q. Okay, moving on to the R. The R is made up of two strokes. The first one looks like this, so it's all an up thin stroke. And you'll notice even though I went down here, I didn't add any pressure. And then it is an underturn. So again, up and around, and then the underturn. So F is made up of a kind of like a very large ascending stem loop. So, but instead of starting here, you're going to start down at this bottom line here. So I'll just show you. It's up, around, and up again. And this right here is very similar to that, to the Q we did here. So again, and F's could be a little tricky when you're actually writing them in letters. I'm sorry, in words. So you want to have this line here, and that's what connects it to the next letter. The next letter we're going to talk about is S. It's over, and then like a tiny little loop there. So that's S. Z is made up of an overturn, so up, down, and around. You have the overturn, and then a little loop at the bottom. Alright, now that we've practiced writing all of the letters, we're going to go ahead and practice connecting them. So what I've done is I just placed some tracing paper over the practice paper. And I took some tape and I taped them together so that I wouldn't have too much sliding or moving around. So we're going to go ahead and write a sentence. So the first word in the sentence is the, T-H-E. And there's two ways that you can do this. The first is just by writing the letters as we learned in order. And the other way I'm going to show you right now is you're going to go ahead and take the crossbar of the T, and that is going to go directly into your H. But again, I'm going to show you one more time. The way I'm writing it is T, taking that and leading directly into the H, E. And you'll notice after every stroke, I'm picking up my pen. And the next word we're writing is quick. So starting with the Q, with the oval, downstroke, And remember this tail that we kind of talked about, the exit stroke? That is what's going to connect it to the U and the I. And remember with the C, you're going to go ahead and write it so this bottom line comes out to the right. And then we're going to write our K. That's quite. The next word is brown. Ascending stem loop. That stroke, that's in the B and the P. And so you might say, how does this connect to the R? So the way that that would have connected to the R is that I would have gone directly into that stroke. But I just want to show you, if you wrote it like that, you wouldn't be able to connect it. So you kind of have to anticipate what your next letter is going to be. So this time, what I'm going to do is go directly into the R. So I go down, and that is how I would have gone into the R. So I'm going to show you that one more time because it's a little tricky. It's up and around and down. Now anticipate that little loop of the R. And then I'm going to write my O. That little tail is what connects to the W. And that little tail is what connects to the N. So brown. Fox is the next word. So with the F, you always want to anticipate what your next letter is. And for this one, it's going to be an O. So I need some space. I'm going to make a long line like that. That's going to connect to the O. Now think about how the O is going to connect to the X. So you have to kind of anticipate it. It's going to be that tail, and then it's going to come into directly into that compound curve for the X. The next word is jumped. So you're going to go ahead and do your entrance stroke for the J and come down. Okay, your next word is going to be over. So that starts with your O, and then anticipate that V, just like how you anticipated the X. So that's OV. And I'm going to show you that one more time because it's a little tricky. So your O is just your oval, and this goes directly into the V. And then your E, anticipate the R. So see how it just went directly into the R. Next word here is going to be the. So remember we talked about how this crossbar goes directly into the H. Now what you can do is, instead of having just a straight crossbar, is you can make it a little, give it a little curve, and that's pretty too. So that's the, and the next word is lazy. So it starts L, A, and that goes directly into the Z. And then a Y. And the last word is dogs. So D, continue. Then there's an O, this is going to be a little tricky. It's just like that. There you have your very first sentence. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the trickier things that we just saw, and that is going directly into the next letter and anticipating what the next letter is going to be. So another example would be like a double R. So if you're writing the word hurry, then it would be H. So anytime you're writing an R, you kind of have to anticipate what the next letter is going to be and not pick up your pen after that last stroke. Another one might be a double F. So you have, for example, the word off. O. Now, normally you think of starting your F down here, but because I have this stroke like that for the F, I need to start it like that. And then from here, you go into your next F. So you can write it like that. I mean, there's a variety of ways, or you can write it like O, F, F, and then make it cross up here, whereas on this one it crossed down there. So for the guide sheets that I gave you is just a good place for you to start and then kind of play around with it and see what works for you. And for example, you can always do something a little more bouncy, like if I was writing the word the, like how we talked about earlier, I might, instead of stopping each letter at this bottom line, I might write it more like T, H, and then bring this H down. I mean, these are all different stylistic things that you can change. You can make maybe your A's, like if I was writing the word apple, maybe I want it a little smaller than the rest of my letters. And maybe instead of starting my L up here, I want it to do something like this. And you kind of just play around and see what you like. And that's it. That's all I have for this week. And then next week, we're going to go ahead and start the basics of watercolor. So go ahead and just practice your strokes this week. Practice putting the letters or making up the letters. And then if you feel bold, then you can practice connecting the letters. But I would kind of just stick with just the very fundamental strokes and the basic strokes for this week. Don't rush yourself and take your time. You're not going to be able to get it all overnight or even within a day or a week. I mean, it may take you weeks and months to actually feel really comfortable with it. So don't feel pressured or rushed when you're practicing. All right, so see you next week.